All right. Good morning, everybody. So just wanted to give a quick shout out here. We have a special guest here, John Wang. He's actually part of Big Asian Energy. He has a new book coming out. I believe it's going to be launched in May or so. So myself, Bill Wang, Oliver Ike, and John Wang here today as part of the Ikigai Essential Big Asian Energy podcast that we're rolling out.
So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being
Anytime.
here, John. Let's kick things off and like learn a little bit more about you. So, love to hear a little bit about like your childhood, your upbringing, like obviously like the Cliff Notes version. So we'd love to kind of hear more about where you came from and up until where we are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite questions to answer is, what kind of Asian are you? And I've got a story around that one later on. Because I remember one time I was at a dinner, my first answer that came up is not a very good one. That was...
I think that's my answer to everybody.
You don't play the piano, basically, right?
I don't play the piano. I don't play the violin. I did at one point. So I was born in Taiwan. My parents are from Taiwan. And they were both, more traditional, I would say traditional Asian parents, big on education, big on focus on, making sure that we're best set for our academic future, which is what brought them to immigrate to Canada and Vancouver, where it is I'm currently living. I've lived around a bunch of different places from, Montreal to different cities. And at the end of the day, I feel most connected to Vancouver because I think it's such a good representation of like the East and the West. It's like a combination of both worlds, and that's oftentimes how I feel as like a third, what do they call us? Third culture kids. Is we are a blend of both. So that's been my background ever since.
Cool. Have you had a conversation with your parents? Like, I'm always interested has specific reasons why people end up in particular places. So have you ever talked to your parents about why Vancouver or why Canada?
Yeah. My mom was an author, and she had a radio show and TV show and stuff like that. And she talked about child education, funny enough. And one day, paparazzi started showing up at our school. And my mom was like, nope, that's not the kind of environment I want my kids to grow up in. So she dropped, credit to her, she dropped all of her, her entire career, her entire life, along with my dad, and with my dad. The both of them dropped all that and immigrated to Canada. Originally, we were supposed to live somewhere else in Canada, but my dad stopped over to visit Vancouver because he had a friend here who took him to a Chinese restaurant, the only Chinese restaurant in the area at the time. And he liked the food so much, he decided to stay. That is actually the full extent of his logic. Was like, okay, Canada got Chinese food. I'm done.
Wow.
That's a good reason.
Let's go look for a house. I'm so impressed sometimes by the way they made their decisions back then compared to the way that I make mine now. Like, I need 6 weeks of research before I'll buy a new phone.
For sure.
And my dad was just like, "Yep, let's move here. This sounds good. Good Chinese food."
Yeah, I mean, like we I think we talked about before. So the place where Bill and I grew up, we were probably like we could count like how many Asian people were in the town we grew up in, and so it's always just like really interesting to me like how people end up like Spokane, Washington, of all places in the world. Like, how do you end up there? So that's really interesting. Like your mom is a celebrity of some sort, and that's crazy that she gave it all up to come here. Yeah, and I mean I heard stories about my mom and like it's interesting like because I didn't grow up speaking the language, so I'm Japanese American. Didn't grow up, couldn't speak any Japanese. Didn't understood a little bit. So I didn't really understand my family background or like my parents or like kind of like what the specifics of why they came here and all that. So like and then when you learn the language, you start talking to your grandparents and your uncles and aunts, and you kind of fill in the blanks of this kind of pastiche of the history that you knew very little about. So just like getting information from like my grandparents about my mom, and apparently there was like a doctor that was like wanting to marry her, and and it just I wouldn't be here today if she had made that choice. So it's just like really interesting, kind of thinking about like history and like all the different things that had to fall into place perfectly for us to be, of the three of us to be here now.
I love that. I run these Asian groups, basically. It's called Rise Collective, and we essentially run different exercises and we do journaling. We talk about our life. It started as a men's group. It started as a place just where people can share what they're going through and co-support and talk about what our experiences are. And one of the exercises we do is called a father share, where we go and interview our father or our mother or mother share and talk to them extensively about their history. My dad is in his 80s now. He's seen some life. He's gone through some stuff. And I recently took him to a dim sum restaurant and actually just sat him down being like, "Can you tell me your childhood history?" And I was blown away by how much I didn't know and how complex his life was. And it was the first time I actually got to see, like, I've always knew that my dad is a human being, obviously, but you never really get to see the layers of our parents' lives until you really sit them down and hear their narration of their own life as people. It was mind-blowing to me.
Definitely. I wish I had that opportunity. So Oliver and I have been talking about this for a while. My dad actually passed away about a year ago, May of last year.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Oh, thank you, sir. And throughout my whole life, I never really had that close relationship with my dad. He's kind of the old school Chinese. He never really told me a lot of things. There's a lot of things I wanted to know about him and understand about his life, but I never had that opportunity. But I definitely want to do that with my mom. She's still around. She's still in good health, but I do want to sit down and just interview her and just get a better understanding, because I sometimes wonder, like, of all places, we end up in Spokane, Washington. Our path is a little bit different. When they left Taiwan, they actually immigrated to South America first. My sister was born in Bolivia. They spent some time out there. My aunt and uncle joined them as well. So all my cousins grew up there and went to school, so they all could speak Spanish. But it's just interesting how, you get from Asia to South America, then to the US, and then now our generation's growing up here. It's just a wild story, I guess.
Wow.
And that's one thing I always miss, is just having those deep conversations with my parents. I've always felt like, I've never been able to open up to them, but I guess it's never too late to do that. And I still have that opportunity with my mother sooner or later.
It's tough though. And I do want to say that I think that our parents are not always open books. And I think culturally speaking, this is not the first time I've heard, in myself, my own stories and stories of my friends, that like, it's not always easy to see our parents open up because they also have to carry the burden of being parents.
Absolutely.
And we just don't have a culture of like, let's talk about our feelings openly in the family,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's why Oliver and I got along so well in high school. Like you said, we were one of the handful of Asian Americans in our high school, in our city. So obviously, we kind of just clicked because of our backgrounds, similar upbringing and whatnot. And, fast forward 30 plus years later, we're still friends. We're still keeping in touch, which is amazing.
That is amazing. I don't think many people have kind of that kind of truly lifelong friendships. Like, I think that's a gift, because you can't exactly go back and make new high school friends,
For sure. For sure. And I think that's kind of helped Oliver and I in our journey as well. A few years ago, we kind of synced up, we rekindled, and we both talked, and we was like, we have some mental issues. We have some stuff going on in our lives. We need some help. We need somebody to talk to. And growing up, we never had that opportunity. It was always kind of like, hey, mom, dad, something's wrong with me. They're like, okay, just go to sleep, wake up the next day, you'll be fine. Just get over it. But Oliver and I, we've kind of learned that, hey, it's okay to speak out. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to go seek help when needed. And that's why we kind of launched Ikigai Essentials and just started talking about life. And it's helped us dramatically.
But I mean, a lot of it is also just like the cultural thing. So a lot of what we focus on is like the culture of talking about feelings and how do you express like care for another. It's very different. So have you seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, the movie?
One of my favorite movies.
So one of my favorite parts of that movie is you're getting fat. I'm worried about what you're eating. right? And that's something the mother says to the daughter. So the mother is, she's, from, I'm not sure her background, but she's either from China or Hong Kong or Taiwan. And her daughter was born in America, right? So that cultural divide where you don't tell people in America, I'm assuming it's the same in Canada, you don't tell people they're getting fat. This is not something that you do. But in Asian culture, that's how you show you care about them. And it's so kind of, it's not intuitive at all, right? It's like something, it's very direct, very blunt, it's very un-Asian, right? Saying directly to someone. But that's like a form, like a term of endearment. Like, I care about you, I care about what you're eating, I care about your health. And it's just it's not worded in the right way. So when you're dealing with your parents, and they would say that every time I went to Japan, my grandparents like, you're getting fat, like, what are you eating? And you're just like, whoa, grandpa, like, slow down.
Yeah.
But that's like them showing you like they care, that they want to make sure that you're healthy and you're well. So there's a lot of like cultural differences too that we're still trying to navigate, and we're going from second to third generation. That's like a whole nother thing, right? So I don't. Do you have children, John?
Not yet, but I would love to. Yeah,
in the future.
I would love to, because I'm really curious to see what kind of parenting I will, what kind of parent I will turn out to be. You have no idea how many, because I talk about parenting and generational patterns quite a bit. And so I get to interview and I talk to a lot of, I would say, first and second generation Asian American parents. And there's generally three different types of parenting. There's, what we call tiger parenting, which is authoritarian parenting. There's jellyfish parenting, which my parents would have called white people parenting, which is much more permissive and lax. And then there's the third type, which is called dolphin parenting. And it's kind of like seen as like the Goldilocks way. Like, this is how you have discipline, but also, show love. And I grew up very much in that I would say more tiger parenting. I was surprised by how many parents didn't realize they were tiger parents, because growing up, they were always taught that to scold is a showing of love. That it's like, well, I'm not hitting my child, so therefore I can't be a tiger parent. But I want them to grow, so I point out all the ways that they're flawed, and I don't understand why they're so sad all the time. Like, well, maybe they're related. I don't know.
I mean, that's kind of the one things that, I mean, just being a parent now, and then kind of thinking about when I was a kid and growing up. I mean, really, when we've talked about this before, Bill and I, is that, all you can really do is really see, the only personal experience you have is your own childhood, right? I mean, that's, you can pick apart, across the street, your neighbors and all those things, but to a certain extent, you can't get into like the weeds of actually the ins and outs of like what a day in the life of these people looks like. The only firsthand experience you have is your own. So, I mean, we talk about this quite a bit, is, the child that you had, like what was good about it and what could have been better. And then how do we instill those things in a productive way to our own children, but at the same time, understanding that things are different, that things have changed, where the children grow up with a screen in their face, basically. So, to completely limit things or take things away completely, it's just not, I don't know how reasonable it is right now. Like, I think social media it can be very harmful, especially for younger kids. But that's kind of like the world we're living in, right? Most people get the information or like how to do things through YouTube or TikTok. And that's just like, it's like, like consumption, like information consumption. So like for us, when we talk about parenting, it's like, okay, what did my parents do well, and what could they have done better? And then instilling those things, but you still make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes. So, I mean, and then, hopefully you can have a conversation with your kids and be okay in terms of like your own pride, saying, you know what, I've made mistakes. I'm human. It takes a long time to realize your parents are human growing up. I'm assuming everyone's kind of been through that, where you kind of forget that they're not just parents, they're also people.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I like the model that if we take away, because exactly what you say, right? So many of us who are Asian grew up with a certain type of parenting, and we look back now and being like, okay, well, now I have this experience, or I have this pattern, or whatever it is. And my general view is that there's no, like, except for the very egregious cases, like the extreme cases, there's no real mistakes. We're all learning. Your parents, I look at the way my parents parented my older sibling, and they were a lot stricter with her. They had higher focuses, discipline, as is the case. I was the second one. They were focused much more on my empathy at that point. And they were different people at different stages. And there can never be such a thing as a perfect parent who doesn't make mistakes, because to be a perfect parent, you stop having a relationship with somebody. Imagine trying to have a relationship with a perfect person. They're not real. You can't see their vulnerability. You can't see their moments of weakness. You can't see their moments of growth or the love underneath, because they're so polished. So I think both things, right? Like for us, as in the work that we're talking about in Ikigai Essentials, I love, by the way, this whole concept and all the topics, diving into mental health is so important. Healing has to be there. And I think at a certain point of the healing is also acknowledging why our parents went through what they went through and did what they did. Because for me, at least, it's all about ending the generational cycles that we keep passing on, right? Like they learned how to criticize as a show of love, or to use achievement as a form of love, or to even just use food as a form of love. And that's the only way they communicate, because that's the way that their parents communicated. And that's the way their grandparents communicated. And that's the way their great grandparents communicated. We now have a chance to make it different, but we will make our own versions of those mistakes.
Totally agree. Oliver and I just talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Is no disrespect to my parents or anything like that, but my goal in life is to be a better parent than them. And my goal in life also is to have my kids to be a better parent than me and my wife. Again, no disrespect to anybody, is they were in different circumstances, different situations back then, but those are all things that for me growing up, I was kind of angry at my parents sometimes. I was like, why are you guys working so much? And they never take me out to go to basketball, the baseball games, whatever I enjoyed and all that. I was a little angry, but then, started understanding there's different circumstances, different sacrifices they're making just for my sister and I. Nothing wrong with it, but the next generation hopefully will learn from that and will improve upon that. And that's kind of my goal and mantra in life, being a parent and as I get older.
I think that's the best goal any child can really have, I think, or any parent can have with their children is, are you doing the work?
Yeah.
Are you doing your own inner work? Are you healing on yourself? Because that's really what it is, right? Like they did studies on how children's mirror neurons fire when they're around parents. And I remember I was at I can't remember if it was Esther Perel. I think it was an Esther Perel event. And she was talking about the studies that they did mapping out how children learn emotional regulation. And it's not based on what you teach your child. Your child just sees how you deal with it and they feel what you're feeling. So like if you get a bill and your anxiety goes up, they immediately associate that. They're like, okay, when it comes to money, I should be anxious and prepare to fight and prepare to in scarcity and get tensed up and get like their whole system is training itself before you even said a word. So the greatest work I think parents can do is work on yourselves, right? Work on ourselves.
It's tough. It's a challenge.
It's
Every
tough.
day's a challenge. Nothing's easy, but that's a great point, John. I love that.
Oh man. I think being a human, this is something that one of my therapist and a teacher says is the hardest thing to do on the planet is to be a human being. Like, yeah, I'm a little biased, but I agree.
I agree with you. I agree with your therapist. That is
we have 3 votes here.
True.
Can we acknowledge that? Can we rubber stamp it?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, and speaking of which, I mean, it's not lost on me, I think, how rare this conversation is. Like three people of Asian descent, second generation Asian descent, male as well, talking about mental health and anxiety and kind of depression. And I think part of the reason why we're doing this is to help kind of normalize conversations like this. Because we talk about,
100%.
when we talk about health, we always think about physical health, eating well,
Mm-hmm.
exercising, those things. But mental health is health, it's a part of it. So I don't think, even though I think we're all comfortable having this conversation, there's many more people who are not ready to kind of have these kinds of conversations. So yeah, it's not lost on me how important it is that the three of us are here talking about these things. And so I'm curious to hear more, about Big Asian Energy. Great name, by the way. I mean,
Thanks.
you have. I mean, the first when actually met you today, for people who are listening, just right before we started recording, and you definitely exude energy. I'm wondering, there's something to be said about kind of like fake it till you make it, right? You kind of you wear the suit for the job that you want, not the job you have, kind of thing. So I'm kind of curious, kind of
Yeah.
about you as a person. Did you always kind of have like this like really good energy that you can kind of bring into different situations, or is it kind of more of like a learned experience, kind of with the work you've done, the research that you've done, or is it a little bit of both? I'm just kind of curious about kind of what's brought you to where we are, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it because I think the energy you bring into a room, I think, is really really important. So I'd love to hear more about
Mm.
that.
Yeah. Great question and a really fun one to answer. I think that this was learned. to simplify the answer, it's learned. I was a really socially awkward kid. And when I'm saying socially awkward, I didn't mean just that I was quiet or shy. For me, I was socially awkward because I didn't know how to be around other people. And I was always taught in some ways that there's a right way to be. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, like you'd go out with your family and, afterwards you kind of get a little bit of a report card on how you acted with your family friends. Like, did you pour tea the right way? Who ate? Yeah.
I'm raising my
Right.
hand.
Like,
That's me.
in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, like, somebody offered me food. Like, am I allowed to say and accept it? Or did I just do something wrong? And I think that combined with the fact that, kind of similar to you guys, was that, when I first came to Canada, I was one of two non-white kids in my first school that I went to. So I had to very quickly learn how to now be around the white kids who were completely different. Because you're around the Asian kids and you very quickly learn that Asian kids have two styles. There's like who you are when you're in front of your parents and adults, and then like who you are when you're in front of your peers, and like two completely different identities and energies.
Absolutely.
And then now you got white kids in the room and white adults. So now you have four identities now you had to balance between. And so I was socially awkward because I just didn't know how to be me. And I remember I was in school and I would bounce from like social group, like cliques, like, the white kids and then like the Asian kids. And then like, back then we called them like fresh off the boat, like fobby Asian kids who were just landed. And then like the Asian American kids who were like running for student council. So like I would run between each of those four groups, but I couldn't stay long. I would literally stay around for like 5 minutes, say hi and like chill for a little bit. And then I'd run to the next group because I was so afraid of them knowing who I was and how awkward I was. So I spent most of my, I would say, teens and later on 20s obsessed with how do I better perform in front of all those groups. And like that was my chameleon pattern, so to speak, right? I was trying to learn like how can I be that guy around the Asian kids, around the white kids, right? Around like the studious Asian kids and around like the smoker Asian kids who are by the smoke kit. Yeah. And then like all those different things, like those were all learned. So fake it till you make it was basically my mantra because to me, faking it wasn't just about faking confidence. It was faking white people confidence, which looks different than Asian people confidence. And then I realized all of that just taught me how to dislike my real self more. And I think that was where things shifted because there was fake it till you make it, which I did. I read a bunch of books, like all those, like How to Win Friends, Influence People, Tony Robbins, all that kind of stuff. Even like the dating and seduction stuff that, it's just a lot of toxicity there. Oh boy. I learned all these different ways of acting until one day I was just like, I have learned that every way except being me was okay. And that was where I was like, okay, the energy has to shift. So to me now, I think Big Asian Energy really is about how do we ground ourselves deeper in our authentic selves? And there has to be a kind of unapologetic nature, which is why the whole book's like, this is an unapologetic guide, is like who you are in your imperfections is fine. If you're sad, we're talking about mental health. If you're sad, that's fine. Be sad. If you're shy and quiet, be quiet. It doesn't take away from your power to be those things.
Yep.
And so these days, when you're seeing me now, this is after my second cup of coffee. I'm going to be a little bouncy. But, stick around with me for a day. You're going to see times where I'm tired. You're going to see times where I'm, meditative and reflective. I don't know. It's all the versions, and they're all me, and they're all Big Asian Energy because I'm Asian.
I love it. I love it. It's funny because I listened to your story and your background. I appreciate for sharing that, John. But I'm kind of the opposite, right? I feel like I grew up trying to learn how to act around Asians, around Chinese people. Maybe because we were so used to being surrounded by whites, Americans, where we grew up. But I had no problem hanging out with them. I had no problem fitting in with them. But come the weekend, come Chinese school, Chinese church, different parties we had to go to, I didn't know how to act. I felt like if I said something wrong, if I didn't sit properly, if I didn't cross my legs or whatever it is at the dinner table, I'd get scolded at the end. I feel like if I took a bite of food when it wasn't time or said something wrong, I'm in trouble at the end of the day, right? So I felt conflicted. It was tough because I felt like there was this huge identity crisis, right? You talk about the 7 principles, the chameleon, and another thing that really the category that I really fit into was being the rebel. I kind of rebelled. I kind of was the bad boy. I was the one who, to be honest, at age 16, I went and got a tattoo. I got my ears pierced without my parents knowing. I tried to be an outsider, I guess. I didn't want to be that part of that Asian community, maybe because I just wasn't so used to it. But now that I look back, it was just, it was kind of a shame. It was kind of sad because it just caused a lot of conflict in my life growing up, and I never knew how to navigate and deal with that.
Yeah, I can relate to the story. I didn't adopt the rebel archetype. I went the opposite way. I just tried to fit in more. But I could so relate to that story of constantly feeling like there was this invisible grading system. Did you eat the first bite? Did you eat the last bite? Like so many invisible rules. Why do we have so many invisible rules, especially around eating, right? And I think if you're Korean, then it's also like you have to drink a certain way and like how much you're supposed to drink and the direction you point.
If you eat all the food, it's rude, or it's it means you didn't make enough. So it's actually the host feels bad when you eat all the food in Korea, which is insane, right? It's like there's all these unwritten rules, and it varies from each region. Asia's not a monolith, right? Every geographic location is a little bit different. So yeah, totally.
But there's always rules. They're always different, but there's usually rules because we're collectivist, right? So like that collectivist culture is so defined by how you act is a reflection on your family. And I think that's the freedom that I remember being envious of the white kids, is that like you got to be you. I got to be a reflection of my family.
Absolutely.
Because if I don't go to that school, if I don't get into that program, if I don't win that award, if I don't, properly pour tea for the right elder and like answer in the right smiley way, then it's not me they're judging. It's my mom and dad, my mom, my dad. It's why weren't you better parents?
Absolutely.
It's Wang. It's not John, right? It's Wang.
No, that's right. Yeah, it's the Wangs.
Entire Wang heritage, right? It runs
your last name, right? And you're representing your entire lineage basically in every social setting. Whereas here, I'm just Oliver. Like it doesn't matter. Like If I do something good, I do something bad. It's all over. It's nothing to do with my family, right? People
Mm-hmm.
rarely know what my last name even is, right? And it's switched, right? So yeah, there's all these kinds of rules, like growing up and like tiptoeing around different things, and still, and then we visited Japan usually in the summers, and so there's not like you're completely cut off from
Mm-hmm.
from your heritage, right? You still need to kind of dip your toes back in over
Mm-hmm.
summer, and then when you're growing up and you don't quite know who you are or where you fit in, right? And that's a huge thing for, I think, probably a lot of Asian Americans. Maybe a little different from you. I'm assuming you grew up speaking the language, but if there's like for me, there's a disconnect, right? I still have a little bit of an accent. If I speak short sentences, usually it's fine, but if I'm speaking longer sentences, it's clear that something's not quite perfect, right? So growing up, I lived in Japan for a little bit, but you don't feel like you quite fit in because you don't speak the language perfectly. But then growing
Oh
up
yeah.
here, you don't quite look like the people in your neighborhood, so you don't quite feel like you fit in there either. And it's for me, it was like, okay, where do I fit in? If I don't fit in
Mm.
with my parents' background and family, if I don't fit in where I was born, where do I go? So there was a lot. I think there was a lot of that, and I think a lot of people kind of feel that, like having to navigate. Okay, like, and then you kind of dip your toes into different social circles. Okay, maybe I should take up cigarettes, and hang out with these guys, or you know,
Yeah.
learn how to play
Yeah.
guitar and like hang out with these people. And so I think like a lot of it is just like acceptance, like
Mm.
who's gonna accept me, and maybe even like how do I I think there's a little bit, if you're not confident in who you are, and I think that's really important. What you're saying is like being comfortable with who you are, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's an easy thing, to be honest with you, especially for younger people growing up when you're influenced by
Mm-hmm.
strangers. If you watch a
Absolutely.
TikTok video, this person has 300 million views, but their ideas are a complete contrast with what you believe in, then it's confusing.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The identity question was huge for me. And I think a lot of us, I don't know any Asian American who doesn't at some point explore that, right? Because we look a certain way. But like it's the same thing. When I go back to Taiwan, like I immediately stand out. I am a foreigner. They know and recognize it. They're like, you walk differently. I'm like,
Same,
what?
same. I'm speaking Chinese to them. They're speaking English back to me. I'm like, I can speak the
Yeah.
language. And
Yeah, they're like trying to be
same,
nice to you and being like, my English is better than your Chinese. At
same.
least for me. I'm
I
like,
feel you. Yep.
like, thank you for trying, but like, we're just gonna move on.
Agreed.
Especially in Taiwan, I don't know if you ever get that. Like, there's a way that customer service can look like in Taiwan, where like it feels almost like they're talking to little kids. The way that they speak in customer service, like they're just like so sweet. It's almost a little too sweet. And I always feel like, am I like a 5-year-old right now? Like,
Just
but
experienced that last
I
year.
never
Yeah.
felt like I still don't, right? I go back and I hang out with my Taiwanese friends and I'm like, I don't know your music. I don't know your food. I thought that bubble tea is super Asian until I went to China and found that people don't drink bubble tea there. I'm like, what? Bubble tea is the most Asian thing I have.
Tell me about it.
How do you not have bubble tea? They're like, we drink real tea. Like we have like 5,000 years of culture around real tea. Sit down. Stop putting that garbage into your body. I'm like, damn it. I just want some taro. Taro? I don't even know.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. That's one thing that I remember I talked to you probably a couple weeks ago, John, and we met, and my eyes were just opened up, right? Like you talked about your background, you talked about what inspired you and all that. One thing I was curious after that conversation was what inspired you to write this book, right? You mentioned earlier that you were doing tutoring, I think kind of helping individuals get into these colleges, pass the SATs and all that. But that's a big shift, you're moving from A to B and it's night and day. What inspired you, John, if you don't mind?
No, not at all. The simple answer of it is that I wanted more Asian people to feel fully confident and embrace who they are. Basically, that's a simple answer. Like my secret reason writing this book, and I actually just had a rediscovery because I'm recording the audiobook right now. My publishers are like asking me to record an audio version, and it's a strange experience to record an audiobook version because one, I just found out how many words I don't know how to properly pronounce, or I pronounce with an accent.
Like taro and taro.
Like taro and taro. Like that will be me like 10 minutes trying to look up the right way to pronounce it. Or like as versus us. I didn't realize there was a difference.
Okay.
Or like I do apparently have an accent. I drop my T's and I mix this T's with R's. Anyway, but also it's something really interesting is as I'm reading through my book, I realize, yeah, I remember now. This was why this matters so much to me. I had a lot of students who were going off into these, great schools and great jobs, and they come back. And they often felt like they were stuck in their careers or their lives or their relationships. And we've had that relationship for a long time. Like I've literally known some of these kids for like more than a decade, like since they were grade 7, right? So I would answer whatever it is that I knew and that I had experienced. And I realized how often they were coming up the same way. Like we were all, in some ways, I felt like holding ourselves back due to these same patterns, right? So like, overachiever patterns of like, okay, I have to keep doing more and self-sacrificing. And if somebody gives me acknowledgement, it's okay. But if I give myself acknowledgement, it's not okay. So their careers will be affected. There are so many fixers that I constantly see, which is like, I can't tell you how many Asian people I've met who are constantly just supporting everyone else around them because we have that self-sacrifice.
Raise my hand again.
Right? Yeah. and that as a result, now we're spreading that as an expectation. And now they're like the office dumpster, which is like the one that everyone gives their work to. And man, I just got tired of it. I'm like, no, man, like
I love it.
we're freaking amazing people. I don't know what your policy on swearing is. I'm going to try to PG-13 this.
You can say whatever you want.
Okay, because I'm like, fucking, we're amazing. Why are we not speaking up for ourselves and showing that swagger? Why do we still get seen as the model minority who is like quiet and diligent in the background? And then I realized that was my story. And that story I shared earlier, like I was always still holding myself back. There was always this belief that I had that I needed to be better or different or more to finally be seen in the totality of who I was. So that was my journey. And yeah, so how did the book come through was I was teaching a class on communication. And as I usually do, I share about what I'm going through. This is like 2016. And I'm in class, I'm talking to these super bright, high achieving, overperforming kids who are all stressed to hell. And I'm talking about, the funny thing is, Ikigai. And I'm talking about don't do what I did, embrace who you are, do that. Don't be locked into this identity you think people have to be. And one of my students, so lovely of her, without any disrespect, raised her hand and in a very soft voice was like, but John, aren't you still teaching us to do that now? And I'm like, oh shit, I'm in a class
She called you out.
Right? Application essays to top universities and being like, hide your Asian identity parts. Don't talk about the fact that you were in anime club. They don't want to see another math kid in anime club, right? And I'm like, okay, why doesn't this exist? And I think that was where it is. Why are we not talking? I'm experiencing it. You're experiencing so many people around us. We know we're doing the work. Why are we not talking about it? And I'm a big believer that if you don't see somebody else doing it, that means that it's your time to pick up your pen. So I picked up my pen. That was it.
Appreciate the honesty and transparency, John. That means a lot. Like, I wish I met you in 2016. I wish I was at that seminar because that would have changed my life. Because, I think I mentioned to you, I got laid off from work about 2 years ago. And when that happened, I was frustrated. I was pissed. I was stressed. But after I slept on it, the next day or 2 days later, I honestly felt like a rock got lifted off my shoulder. I was getting burned out. I was always the one where, hey, if nobody can do it, just contact Bill, just ping Bill, just Slack Bill, just email Bill. He'll take care of it. Even when I'm on PTO on vacation, they would reach out to me. But I got to a point where I just felt like, what am I doing? You know, I'll use some swear words too. Why am I doing all this shit, man? Like, I'm only a human being. I'm only capable of so many things in so many hours. I have a family to take care of. Why am I busting my ass off doing all of this, right? So I told myself after I calmed down, after I slept on it, that my next move will be something that I'm more passionate about. I get it. I need to earn money. I need to, I have mouths to feed. I have a family to support, but I need something that I'm passionate about. And that was not cutting it. The grind, it was a good salary. Don't get me wrong. I had good benefits and all that, but just too much stress, too much burnout. And I felt like people were just taking advantage of me. So like I said, I just wish I met you 10 years ago, John. That would have changed my life dramatically, man. Seriously.
I think we would have learned a lot from each other.
For sure. For sure.
I could really relate to that. It's the belief that we are supposed to burn out.
For sure.
And that there's this dichotomy that at least I was taught. It's almost like unspoken dichotomy that you're either overachieving or you're nothing.
For sure. For sure.
Like there was never a good enough. There was never this like, yeah. And that wasn't external. That was also internal. At least for me, I you know, I'm hanging out with my wife who, you know, funny enough, she's a cosplayer and, you know, she has this hobby of dress, you know, like creating costumes and she loves it. And she's like, what's your hobby? You know, early on I'm dating and I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
what's a hobby?
I'm an entrepreneur. My hobby is work. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Well, what do you do after work? What do you mean after work?
Work? Sleep?
There's no, like sleep is so that I can wake up and do more work. You go on vacation, yeah, you got to recharge, do more work. Like everything was just, how do I do more work? How do I better support those around me? How do I sacrifice more? And like, where did we learn that?
Yeah, yeah. And it's sad, like you mentioned. Go ahead, Oliver.
I mean, if overachieving is the baseline, then you can never, you'll never be able to do it. You'll never be able to do enough, right? Definitely. So it's not. I don't think it's overachieving. I think in other people's eyes, you're doing, maybe you're overachieving, but for you, that's the work you should be doing, right? In your mind. So it's impossible. It's an impossible
and it's not enough
race, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're not even, in your eyes, you're not even overachieving. You're just doing what you think you need to be doing, even though you're completely burning yourself out. But I would love to hear your thoughts on something that I think you'll have valuable insight on. So one of the most important things I think in terms of kind of like being our true authentic selves is audacity, and that's like one of my favorite words.
Yeah, love that word.
And then when we look, so like I'm a musician, kind of in my free time, and I think it applies to arts for the most part, where like you look at, you know, this is going to be my get off my lawn moment, but like when you're looking at new like musical artists, right?
Yeah.
I'm just like not impressed at all, like with like the quality of music that's coming out. But you know, I can't remember. I would love to quote, you know, attribute this quote to the right person, but I can't remember exactly who said it. But basically, someone I think in the music industry said that audacity almost always trumps creativity and talent. Meaning, the people that are able to achieve this level of success, it's not a talent thing. It's that they actually have the audacity to do it, to go out and do it. And that's why they were able to kind of, you know, be on, you know, the Billboard Top 40 or whatever. It's not a question about having the talent. There are plenty of people that are in their basements with more talent than, you know, the newest artist right now who's making millions of dollars and sold out concerts all over the place. And I think that can apply to a lot of different things, like having the actual audacity to do the thing that you are more than capable of doing. So I think that maybe relates to kind of what you're talking about a little bit here. So I'd love to hear, because that's a tricky thing, I think, to kind of overcome that, especially for Asian people and second generation Asian people, where it's all about fitting in. And you know, it's the group mentality. You don't want to stick out. You want to be a part of the group. So how do you I guess, like, how do you navigate that in terms of like the people you work with and kind of from your own experiences? how do you make that leap for a lot of people that know that they can do it, but maybe they don't have the courage, or there's
Hmm.
question marks in their head? Like, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Audacity is such a great word for this because by definition, audacity isn't just courage, right? There's a deeper layer to it. There's almost like a breaking of the rules. Like, how dare you do it? there's that kind of energy attached to it. And I think that a big part of that is the psychological safety that we may not have felt for many of us who grew up in a, either from code switching or because your family had, achievement based love as a focus. So the idea of audacity really speaks to me because a lot of times growing up, I kept waiting for permission. Like, a big thing is I kept waiting for permission. I feel like, okay, like even writing this book, I had, at the point I was working with two different psych researchers who were on my team because I wanted to make sure that it had the right research, and I was bringing in CEOs and executives and interviewing them, and I was doing all this research, putting it together. And at a certain point, I realized, why am I working so hard to validate this? Is because I didn't believe I had the permission to write this book. And it didn't make any sense. When you think about it, like, what do you mean? Like, you got a book deal. By definition, that's somebody giving you permission. But even then, it's like, well, who am I to write this book? Am I Asian enough to write this book?
For sure.
It's like, who am I? Am I supposed to be a doctor? Am I supposed to have a PhD? And of course, none of those things really make any sense. It's a book about the experience that I went through. Of course, I can only be an expert at being me, and the experiences of the people that I wrote about or the studies that I went in. So it's all there, but there was still that story in the back of my head. I think the real answer is challenging the feeling of unsafety. And that was what came up when we were developing this whole system, essentially, this framework. I remember talking to a psychologist, and we were sitting down. I mapped out, like, what are these patterns, and what do they mean, and where do they come from? It's called maladaptive patterns, basically, like perfectionism. And that feeling of audacity is at the core because essentially you have to challenge a secret and unspoken belief, like a secret rule. And for me, that secret rule would have been, I am allowed to write a book called Big Asian Energy if I have blank, a PhD, somebody who's an expert tapping me on the shoulder. I need to have taught at NYU for a couple of years. And whatever that idea may be, there's no right answer, because for the person who's at NYU teaching, they may be like, well, I don't have a double PhD in Beijing. And the person in Beijing is going, well, I don't know much enough about the South Asians, so I can't talk about it. Like, there's so much of this that at the core of it is just like, well, is this work going to help? Like, is the value of what you're trying to create, talking about Ikigai, is this going to help? Then great, then you shouldn't have the right to not write it. Right? It's almost like your responsibility, right? Like for you guys, like it's your responsibility now that you've gone through the journey to share that journey. So to answer the second question that you had, which is how do you get over it? I think the answer is through small bits of incremental testing of that rule. So, I talk about there's like the 4 A's structure, which is the first thing is acknowledging and awareness. So like, we are aware, okay, I currently believe I am not supposed to be here to talk on stage about this topic, let's say. The second thing is acknowledging. It's like looking at the story of like, okay, I have this belief, I have the fear. And then we go into either action to say, well, screw it, I'm just going to do it anyway.
Right.
Unless somebody stops me, or I could think of a reason why this is harmful to somebody else, I'm going to do it anyway until my system learns, oh, it's actually safe. And that it's actually safe can be as small as it's actually safe for me to say no to somebody who makes a request of me to do some work and I feel like I should do it, all the way to it's actually safe for me to tackle that new project, write that song, pursue that PhD, write that book, whatever that dream might be. The audacity comes from doing it even though nobody said you can. So I think your question is answered by your own word. It is audacity.
Yeah, I mean, also maybe preparation. I think preparation can solve a lot of anxiety for people, because ultimately when you're talking about and that's a really interesting point that you mentioned, like who am I to write this book, like who's going to listen to me, and all those kinds of doubts that you may have. And you could go down to the further you go down the rabbit hole, the less likely you're going to actually be able to write the book. But at the end of the day, if it's a good book, then none of that matters, right?
Absolutely.
If the album is amazing, if the song is amazing, all those questions go away. Like, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? Oh, this is a really good song. Or this book has a lot of really interesting things. So if you're able to overcome that doubt, and you have a really good product, or you have really good ideas and you're able to articulate them well, then I think maybe that's like the second step, where that immediately validates you as being qualified to do the thing. If the product or if the end value is
if the quality speaks for itself. Absolutely. The other layer that I add to that, even, Oliver, is who am I allowing to judge my work as being a qualifier? And I think that's a big question, because that's still an external validation, right? That's still an external locus of control. Somebody else will then grade me to decide if I am qualified retroactively. And my level of audacity that I would even challenge them to take on, and it's up to your comfort levels, is why not go as far as to say that you are the arbitrator of deciding whether you're good enough? As in, well, who is good enough? Well, do you like it? Do you believe in this song that you're writing? Do you believe in this work? Okay, you have 15 people on Instagram who liked your post, and in your mind, you're like, I'm a failure because that guy over there has 3 million. And I only have 200. But I'm like, imagine 200 people in a room. Imagine like you're playing a song at a gig in a bar, and 200 people showed up. Like, who are we then to say that my work isn't as good enough as Katy Perry or Lady Gaga, who has 20 million? Like, did it change something for me? And I think that's where the basis should start from, is I get to decide.
Agreed.
Whether or not I like it. And is it true to me? That's it.
That's great. That's beautiful.
That's the level of audacity I prefer.
I love it.
I'm channeling some of Bill's rebel energy there.
All right. So we're actually kind of running up until the hour. I'm sure you're kind of busy with a lot of things. So before we kind of wind things down, are there any other things you wanted to talk about in terms of your website or your book, or anything else that you wanted to kind of close on before we close out?
Yeah. Right now, until the book comes out May 27th, we are doing free giveaways for anyone who does a pre-order, because I just think that, the sooner we get that information out there, the better. And my publishers are allowing me to do free giveaways right now. So right now we have things like, an assertiveness guide that helps people speak more assertively and more confidently. We have like the 7 patterns guide that identifies in which ways we might be holding ourselves back unconsciously. Because I'm a big believer that a lot of the reason why we're not successful is because we hold ourselves back. We have self-sabotaging patterns, or at least that was my experience, and we don't really realize it. And they existed to help protect us. So we have a guide on that. We have a guide on communication and how to be a more confident communicator. So until then, you can check it out at bigasianenergy.com, or go to Amazon or wherever it is you get books and type in Big Asian Energy.
I'm glad you mentioned the free stuff, because I'm Chinese Asian. I love free stuff, so I'll pre-order just because of that. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I was actually going to hit that pre-order button, because I definitely want to get my hands on that book.
Thank you so much.
Excited for it.
Audiobook is going to be available at some point down in the future, correct?
Yeah, audiobook should be out by the time that the book comes out. I don't know what the pre-orders are, and I'm really excited. Personally, I'm really excited for it. Just been having a blast recording. And again, it's going to sound like this, as with maybe a few more as's.
And I'll make sure your pronunciation's right on everything that you say.
Please,
right? Otherwise,
text me if you catch any mispronunciations, because there's definitely going to be a couple in there.
No, but super excited, super good stuff. Really appreciate the time, John. Like Oliver said, Big Asian Energy. It's just a great name, man. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm here. That's what I'm here to believe in. I'm like, I just want to see Asian people step into the big Asian energy. Unapologetic audacity. Go out there and change the world.
We love it. I wish I met you earlier, John, but I'm glad we're connected now.
Yeah, many lifetimes ago.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, thanks so much, John.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right,
Thanks so much for
take
having
care.
me again.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, everybody.